We are ready to complete the pillowcase project. This is on your directions. This is step 18 and 19. I've turned it wrong side out, so I have the wrong side on the outside. I've gone to the iron. I've given it a good press so that my seams are not folded under, so that when I sew, I should not catch my raw edges in the seam. I should sew on the left side of the raw edges that you can feel in there, and then my seam allowance and my raw edges will be totally concealed and no one will be able to see them. So this time, just to assure that that happens, I want you to sew a little larger seam allowance than 1/4 inch. Maybe I'm just going to make sure that I can see just a little bit of fabric on the right side of my sewing foot, because I know that that's a 1/4 inch. And I'm going to keep my eye on the machine, and if I have painter's tape, I could even lay it here and mark where I want to sew, but I want it just a little bigger. I am going to start on the cuff again, cuff side, sewing a little larger than a 1/4 inch, not much. Again, I start with my needle and my fabric. Come forward a bit, back stitch a bit. Whoops. Every machine's different. Here's my back stitch and forward. I'm not watching my needle, I'm watching my seam allowance line so that I am keeping my seam straight. I can see the same amount of fabric all the way down. So I sew down the edge of my pillowcase. Sewing over all those thicknesses was difficult, and I'm sorry. I didn't do it as straight as I would have liked, but it will be okay. I'm keeping an eye on the edge of my fabric. I'm not watching the needle. If I watch the needle, then my seam isn't straight. I'm watching where my fabric's going through the machine. I'm going to get down to the end, and if necessary, I'm going to walk it into the corner. My machine doesn't walk, it's mechanical, but yours will. And I get it to where I want it to pivot stitch again. So again, I'm going to lift my presser foot, pivot my fabric around, line it up straight on the line that I want to use, or the distance I want to use from my foot, and I'm going to sew across the bottom of the pillowcase. Again, I am not going to pivot and sew up this side because there is no seam there. That is a fold. I do not need to sew there. I do not want you to sew there. Do not sew there. Okay, and then we're going to get to this edge and we're going to back stitch, turn it right side out, press it, and we are done. Going to back stitch now, forward and back, forward and back. Okay, lift the presser foot, take my fabric out, and cut my threads. You always want to cut your threads. Don't just cut them at the end. Cut them as you go. It makes for a neater project in the end. You haven't missed any threads. You want it to look professional and not to look like it's homemade. Okay? All right. So we open this up. I've got the finger in the corner there. I'm just trying to pull that out as best as I can. Come down to this corner again and poke that out as best that I can. Okay, if you remember last time I used a straight pin, sewing pin to just pull that out and make that point gently. Point is professional, as square, as pointy as I can. Gonna come over and do the same here. Now I have a more thickness there, so it's not probably going to look quite as good. But I can make it look quite a bit better. Okay. Now, notice that here's what I want to check. The top matches fairly well. It's a little bit off. My line here is perfect, but the length of my accent piece is not perfect, so I made a mistake there somewhere. I mean, if I were a perfectionist, that would be perfect. Okay, need to be perfect. Again, it's about cutting first. If you don't cut correctly, there's no way to sew it perfectly. And then secondly, you're working towards perfection as a seamstress. I'm going to go to the iron and I'm going to press this open. I'm going to put it over the arm of the iron and get right in there and press that open. And I'm going to try to press this edge as nice as I can. See, it's going to want to fold over and in like that, but I want to, by taking little presses, I want to work it between my fingers and get my seams pushed out as best that I can, and then press that. Okay, voila, you're done. Congratulations, a finished pillowcase. And I think it's quite cute. All right, happy sewing.